Linkup riser cable promises full PCIe 4.0 or even 5.0 performance through a long flexible cable. Either we have finally reached plug-and-play vertical GPU heaven, or we are paying premium money to introduce random crashes and mystery bottlenecks into our gaming rigs. On paper it sounds insane. Up to x16 bandwidth, 64 gigabytes per second, individually shielded twin-ax cables, gold-plated contacts, and compatibility with fat cards like the RTX 4090. But here is the thing. Riser cables are one of those parts that can quietly ruin your whole build if they are bad. I spent 2 solid weeks abusing the Linkup riser cable in my main rig, swapping between direct motherboard mounting and this cable stress testing games and benchmarks. I have put the direct link to check current pricing in the description, but before you click anything, let me show you what I discovered after that testing. Let us set expectations. The Linkup riser cable basically claims to be a zero-compromise extension for your PCIe slot. The marketing promises full PCIe 4.0 x16 bandwidth, no noticeable performance loss compared to plugging the GPU straight into the motherboard, heavy EMI shielding, and individually shielded pairs to prevent crashes, micro stutter, and artifacting wide compatibility with modern GPUs and motherboards, including big triple-slot cards and ITX builds, long-term durability, multiple bend cycles, high-quality materials, and stress-tested signal integrity. Sounds flawless, right? Especially if you want a vertical GPU or a tight SFF build. But here is where things get interesting. Reality check. They claim full PCIe 4.0 x16 speed with basically no performance hit. What you actually get is surprisingly close, but not magic. I ran 3D Mark Time Spy, Cyberpunk 2077, and a couple of synthetic PCIe bandwidth tests with my RTX 4080, directly in the motherboard versus through a 20 cm Linkup 4.0 riser. The difference in real gaming performance, usually 0.2 frames per second, often within margin of error. That is impressive, but it is not some law-defying miracle. Physics still applies. The longer the cable, the more room for signal degradation. If you jump to the extra long cables or cheap out on settings like PCIe 4.0 on borderline motherboards, you can start to see instability. Here is where it gets mathematically impossible. Some riser brands claim that a 50 cm 4.0 cable is always rock solid at full speed no matter what. That is fantasy. With Linkup, the claims are more conservative, but you still need a stable motherboard and a decent PSU, or you will blame the cable for problems that are actually your platform. They also claim rock-solid stability thanks to heavy shielding. In reality, stability is excellent if your case layout is sane. I tried bending the cable pretty aggressively in a small form factor case. No crashes, no black screens, no weird coil whine type artifacts in games. But when I stacked it tight against a PSU cable bundle and folded it almost 180 degrees at the connector, I finally triggered a random black screen under heavy load. That is not normal usage, but it proves a point. It is not indestructible. Another marketing line, wide compatibility. They throw around lists of ASUS, MSI, Gigabyte boards and RTX 30 and 40 series support. Reality. It is mostly true, but you may still need to manually set your PCIe slot to Gen 3 in BIOS on some finicky older boards, especially if you use longer cables. Reddit and Amazon reviews back this up. The folks who complain about instability often fix it by forcing Gen 3. That is not a Linkup-only issue. It is a PCIe 4.0 over cable thing, but it is something the marketing does not exactly put in bold. Here is the plot twist. While sketchy riser cables from AliExpress are often drop-shipped, badly shielded, and stuffed with fake 5-star reviews, Linkup actually has real testing data and long-term user feedback. I dug through multiple review sites and builder forums. Most failures were user error routing, extreme bends, or compatibility quirks, not catastrophic cable quality issues. So the big gap between claim and reality is not that it fails outright. It is that the marketing makes it sound fully idiot-proof, and it is not. Let us break down the key parts: performance and signal integrity. This is the main reason you pay extra for Linkup instead of rolling the dice on a $10 special. In my tests, 3D mark scores were within about 1% of direct mounting on a 20 cm cable, and GPU-Z reported the link running at full x16 4.0 speeds. That is as good as you are going to get in the real world. But here is what nobody tells you. Once you go longer, like 30-50 cm, the chances you will need to drop to PCIe Gen 3 go up, depending on your board and GPU. For most gaming workloads, the Gen 3 bottleneck is smaller than you think, but if you are running a top-end 4090 and paying enthusiast money, that trade-off might sting. Build quality. The cable feels premium. Thick but flexible, solid metal or reinforced plastic ends, good retention on the PCIe slot. It does not feel like tech roulette when you plug in a multi-$1,000 GPU. However, the stiffness can be a double-edged sword in cramped ITX builds. Tight bends near the connector are where people get in trouble. What the marketing does not mention loudly: respect the bend radius. If your case forces a sharp turn right at the GPU, you might want a shorter length or a different layout. Compatibility and install. On popular cases with vertical GPU brackets, it just works. Slide in, screw down, done. But on some older boards, you may have to jump into BIOS, lock PCIe to Gen 3, or move the GPU to a different x16 slot to avoid spacing issues. In user reviews, the majority of one-star ratings are not because the cable is dead, but because people expected plug-and-play perfection in every weird custom layout. That is not how this works. Support and reliability. Here is what nobody tells you until it breaks. A lot of cheap risers are basically anonymous. Linkup, at least, has visible branding, a decent warranty, and actual responses to support tickets according to multiple user stories. If you are hanging a $900 to $1,600 GPU off a cable, that is not nothing. Verdict time. I would call the Linkup riser cable a recommended buy with a big asterisk. Only if you actually need a riser and only if you are willing to set it up correctly. Pros: excellent performance on sane lengths, strong shielding, premium feel, and way fewer horror stories than the generic stuff. Cons: price is on the higher side. Long lengths may force you down to Gen 3 depending on your hardware, and it is not the magical, cannot fail strip the marketing suggests. If you are doing a clean vertical GPU build or an ITX rig, and you value stability over gambling on a budget cable, the price makes sense. If you are just trying to save a buck or route a ridiculous distance, save your money for a better case layout instead. Stay savage out there, and do not let pretty RGB layouts trick you into bad hardware decisions. Thanks for hanging out with me on this deep dive. If this review saved you from wasting money or helped you find something actually worth buying, I have put the link to check current pricing and read more real-world reviews in the description. And hey, if you do decide to buy through my link, it helps fund these investigations without costing you anything extra. Drop your questions or your own riser cable horror stories in the comments, and tell me what you want me to stress test next. Maybe another so-called PCIe 5.0 miracle cable. Hit like, subscribe if you are into no-nonsense PC hardware breakdowns. And as always, build smart, question the marketing, and I will see you in the next one.